Okay, Chair.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Committee on the 5th of October. I'm County Councillor Ruth Edwards, and I chair the Planning Committee. It has been held remotely. The meeting has been held in accordance with the emergency legislation, and this enables the Council to hold this meeting remotely alongside the Council's constitution and ensures that the Council can continue to operate and make democratic decisions in an open and transparent way. I would like to remind members that this meeting is still being live streamed to the public, and can I request that you all switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you're not speaking directly to the committee to ensure that there is no unnecessary background noise, like dogs sometimes tend to be barking. All sections of the Members' Code of Conduct will apply to members in this rural meeting environment and are as applicable now as they are in a traditional meeting setting. Can I also remind members of the meeting to ensure their chat functionality is switched on, and should they wish to speak on a particular item on the agenda, to make their request clear in that area, and I will invite you to speak at that relevant point in the meeting, where you would then unmute your microphone and switch on your camera. Decisions of this remote committee will hold the same weight as a decision of a normal planning committee, provided that the meeting remains quorate and meets its legislative requirement to make a decision, regardless of whether a member of this committee meeting is unable to cast their vote due to technical issues. As we are all well aware, we do get them from time to time, but not obviously quite as bad as they've had with Facebook, apparently. The decision of this committee will remain valid. And I thank you all and welcome everybody, members and also officers and members of the public. I think the first item on the agenda will be for apologies of absence first, please.
Yes, Chair, we've received one apology from Councillor Howard.
Right, thank you, Richard. Declarations of interest, please. No declarations of interest. I hope you've all had time to read the minutes, and would someone like to move the minutes unless there is something that's been raised as an inaccuracy in that last meeting?
Happy to move, Chair.
Right, who's that that's moving? Councillor Phil Murphy, who's seconding it?
Dave Evans.
Right, thank you, Councillor Evans. So that I will sign that when I'm in County Hall, as at the moment I'm not in County Hall. So we go on to the first application of the day, and that is application DM 2020-00636. And Phil, I believe you're presenting it. If you would introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, my name is Philip Thomas. I'm Development Services Manager with Monmouthshire County Council, and I'm presenting this application at Henry Farm in Monkswood. So if I share the presentation with you. Right. Bear with me, it's just taking a little bit of time to go to full screen. Right, can members see that? That's the presentation.
I can, Phil.
Yeah, okay, that's good, thanks. Yeah, so this was deferred from the previous meeting of committee for a site inspection which took place yesterday. Most of the members here will probably be familiar with the site, even if they weren't there yesterday, because it's close to County Hall. So it's by the entrance to the ordnance factory at Glasscoid, and there are two large agricultural sheds on the site at the moment, a hard standing area, and this is a proposal for the third shed that would be slightly nearer the entrance to the site off the A472. So it would be a it would accommodate sheep and general purpose agricultural purposes as well. So the building would measure 55 metres by 12 metres deep with a pitch roof to a maximum height of 6.7 metres. It would be steel framed with 3 walls and the roof clad in olive coloured galvanised steel, if I just take you through the pictures there. So the actual site of the building is here, this longer building, 55 metres long. We looked at that building yesterday, and that's an open fronted building where sheep were being accommodated yesterday, mainly for our purposes. And then that's the building that's proposed to be open fronted, facing away from neighbouring properties into the yard itself. And it would be olive green, as said, so it's certainly got a particularly agricultural form and appearance. That would be where the building would go. On the hard standing area, there would be tree and hedgerow planting to provide screening from the A472. That again shows where some of the planting will go. That's the extent of the holding there. And then there's some photographs of the site, which it shows the sort of agricultural nature of the site, the hard standing, some of the equipment that's outside, and then that's the position of where the top picture is where the building would go, sitting alongside the existing agricultural open fronted building. So during 2020, the applicant started purchasing Dorset sheep, and currently has a flock of approximately 135. I think that was 200 mentioned yesterday. So this has been updated. He intends to increase the flock to 350 breeding ewes over the next 3 years. And as younger Dorset ewes have a shorter gestation period, it's anticipated that the flock would lamb 3 times over a 2-year period. And lambing has been underway on an intermittent and ad hoc basis since late November 2020, with that part of that existing open fronted building you can see in the top photo there used for mothering and monitoring. I won't go through the whole report again, as we went through this 2 weeks ago, but what I would say is that it's been carefully assessed by officers in terms of impact on amenity, the orientation of the building away from any neighbouring dwellings facing into the yard, the solid walls facing back towards any neighbouring properties, and the relative distances involved indicate that there wouldn't be an issue in terms of noise disturbance to neighbouring properties. It's also been carefully designed in terms of surface water management so that there would be no risk in terms of waterlogging, phosphate pollution or flooding in the locality as a result of its design. In terms of landscape impact, it's close to a group of buildings. There are, as we all know, plenty of buildings in that sort of area alongside the A472 in terms of the College Gwent complex, our own complex, and the club building further down, which this would sort of sit within the context of and as part of a group. So we don't think that there's harm to be caused from landscape impact. And in addition, there would be landscape mitigation in the form of planting to help screen it once mature from the roadside. So subject to that careful assessment, we consider that the building is fit for purpose. It has an agricultural function. It will help this business grow into a larger and more viable farming enterprise. So subject to the conditions in the report, we would recommend approval for the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. I should have asked before you presented the report that have all members read the late correspondence? I'm assuming that they have, because that was quite detailed, the response. And if you haven't read it, I believe Craig is now going to read it all out so that just in case that you're clear about all the late correspondence. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is late correspondence which was presented to members in your bundle, and I'll just read it now just to clarify if anyone hasn't seen that. So this is from the applicant's agent. This application is for a building measuring 54.9 metres by 12.1 metres, 664 metres squared and 5.4 metres to the eaves. It was originally submitted on 2nd of June 2020 in preparation for lambing in January 2021, as the existing building is not big enough for lambing the flock of 135 pedigree Pole Dorset ewes, expanding to 350. The application was delayed due to procedural matters and a perception that the existing buildings were adequate in size and design. The secure storage machinery building on site is enclosed with inadequate ventilation, predisposing sheep to pneumonia. The existing open-sided building is a similar design to the proposed, but is not large enough to accommodate the sheep and their hay and bedding. Small lambs require housing during harsh weather in individual pens for 1 to 2 days, whilst bonding with their mother. Otherwise, they become confused in the mass of the flock, miss mother, and starve to death. It is not unusual for 15 to 20 ewes to lamb in a single day. Since ewes were already in lamb in 2020, the applicant could only lamb the ewes in the existing building and turn the lambs out in the January weather. The result was catastrophic. Newborn lambs were trampled by other ewes, and the space provision was totally inadequate. To avoid further deaths in the building, animals were turned out after 1 day, causing lambs to freeze to death in the snow or heavy rain. Ewes left were full udders, scuppered to mastitis that were mastitis, this was called. Thank you, Madam Chair. The proposed building is designed with full reference to industry standard space requirements for a 350 flock with a split lambing regime, lambing 3 times in 2 years, meaning that sheep will be housed for several months of the year. This breed of sheep is not tolerant to harsh winter weather, as we discovered in January. A polytunnel has been suggested as an alternative, but this does not comply with phosphate regulations, which require a concrete floor and walls to prevent leaching of effluent. Polytunnels are also low, making cleaning with machinery impossible, meaning they would needed to be much larger than the proposed building. Neighbours originally voiced concerns about noise from sheep housing. The proposed building has solid walls to deflect the noise. Polytunnels cannot do this. Concerns have since been allayed. The height of the proposed building enables machinery to clean out the pens after lambing and fill feeders for the ewes at lambing time. Low buildings do not provide adequate ventilation and are impractical for modern farming. The applicant had to make plans for an increase in flock. No parents would have a baby and then decide to make space for the baby after it is born. The planning process can be protracted, and applicants need to plan well in advance of necessity, otherwise the applicant could be in the same situation as the last lambing season with significant animal welfare problems. The officer report has indicated the application meets all planning policy tests, and that application should be determined on planning policy. And that is from the applicant's agent, Ian Williams. And that concludes the late correspondence that was submitted, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Craig. I believe we have the local member, Councillor Val Smith, who wishes to comment on the application.
Yes, please, Chairman, because...
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome.
So, thank you very much. I haven't had the opportunity to read the late correspondence or anything. Things are a little bit disjointed in the household. Right. These sheep need an awful lot of accommodation. The expenditure... Right, let me get myself sorted out, Chairman. The expenditure on this shed alone, the tanking that's required, the layout for your piping of your water to your tanks here, there and everywhere. I can't think that this is a very good business plan. It's not going to be viable with just sheep. So if I can just clarify in my own mind, and for members who I'm sure know these things, a lot of effort has gone in to justify this application. I noted these were the comments from various offices and how they are then qualified and whatever, and it comes to a satisfactory conclusion, if you like. Now, the holding referred to, it's detached completely from the existing farmhouse and ongoing 4-barn conversions Dutch down the road. I'm correct in that, aren't I?
Yes.
The outline of the applicant. So this is a completely standalone application. And in the event of the farmhouse being sold off, we have a problem with accommodation applied. Anyway, applicant owns 40 acres. He's got a farm business tenancy on a 10-year lease for 94 acres. There are already 2 massive sheds on that standing. These were deemed permitted development. As local member, I was astounded when these suddenly popped up. There was a justification for them, and suddenly they're there. I really would question how that decision was made, because it doesn't seem right. Application seeking consent now to move a log cabin that's stored in the one shed a mile down the road, and for it to be confirmed as an agricultural worker's dwelling. Yet there's a farmhouse and 4 barn conversions next door. The applicant's agent has responded to objections over noise, advising the applicant was previously operated, and he's come back and said, Okay, the applicant was operating machinery, sales, business, refurbishment and various other things on the site. I know that. I know the noise that was generated and the activity that was there, which caused anything. We are told by the applicant, and quite rightly, that this activity has now ceased and has been relocated. Well, if anybody looked at Henry Farm and the barns yesterday, unless they've gone in the last 2 days, there were quite a lot of bits of equipment distributed there. It's relocated down there amongst the barn conversions. The Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, a well-functioning planning system, is fundamental for sustainable development and achieving sustainable places. I question why this application is being considered. Is it legal when there is a retrospective planning application for the hard standing area on which a portion of this application will stand? To me, it seems almost like that lovely old saying, putting the cart before the horse. I cannot see this being a viable business. We are being confronted now with the prospect of 3 very large sheds in a position that, as a planning authority, looking to the future, would we have thought of establishing an industrial area on this site? I have a great concern about control of the site. I think that the applicant needs to think carefully about his financial situation to embark on expenditure on another large shed, dependent on having a successful sheep flock or flock of sheep. Not a very profitable venture, sheep. That's their option. So as local member, I am concerned, very concerned, Chairman. We've had applications going through, officer decisions that arrived at 2 sheds. We're now confronted with a 3rd one. It's acknowledged by the agent that yes, other activities were certainly ongoing there. I know they were. Repair, maintenance, whatever, of farm and agricultural equipment. That has now shifted, or the bits and pieces have gone down the road, and I don't know where we're going. I'm sorry, Chairman, I just don't support, the Community Council doesn't support, and I've not made a good presentation to make my case at all, but I think committee need to think seriously. When that young man has achieved a really large flock, then is the time to be considering additional accommodation, because sheep don't live indoors all the time. They lamb and they go out again. When you slaughter them, don't you re-roast it? 12 weeks to put on your plate. The Dexters you referred to, I thought they were quite a hardy sheep, actually. That was quite all right on the hill. I don't know. So one member who was very concerned about the activities that have taken place in a rural area. Phil, you made reference to the buildings at the equestrian centre. Okay, they are tied to the college. They are part of that setup. Then you have a break. Then you have the building, the farm, which is a listed building, remember. It's a grade 2 listed. You made reference to the clubhouse. The clubhouse is a single low building that you barely notice as you go farther on up there. I am not happy with the application. I wish I could support it. I always like to think people are enterprising. I don't think this is the correct route and the correct decision. And I think that we do need to seriously think. We have another application on a parcel of ground that this application is going to sit on. How can we make, or how can members be asked to make a decision when there is a pending application on ground on which it is to sit? It doesn't seem very logical. I thank you, members, very much. And if I disappear, it's because I've got a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Val. Thank you for your input as a local member. I now welcome. Sorry, Phil, do you wish to comment before
No, I can comment later if you like, but I just thought it might be easier if I commented now on some of those issues, because it might cloud the judgment of what some of the members are going to come in with then, or they might either accept or not what my explanation might be. So it might be opportune for me to speak on a couple of those issues now. That's
yes,
all right.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah. We have to look at what's before us. It's for an agricultural building for sheep. It's not what it might be used for in the future. If it's used for something else in the future, that becomes a potential enforcement matter, and we look at that then, or they would need a change of use of the building. But at the moment it's proposed for an agricultural building to expand the flock there. And you know, in policy terms, we do try and support the local economy, the local rural economy, and this is a sort of proposal that, from a planning perspective, officers feel that we should be supporting to help grow a business in the locality without causing harm to environmental and relevant material issues such as landscape. The matters I was saying in terms of there's College Grant buildings, there's the club further down, that was just to make the point there is sporadic development alongside the A472, as the members will be aware, rather than saying that this was something similar to those. I'm just putting it in the landscape context of where it sits really in terms of that. So it's just to focus members to say that this is proposal for agricultural use. It's not for employment or industrial use, and that's not before us at the moment. In terms of the hard landscaping area, the large hard standing there has got permission. There is an area immediately in front of the building which is subject to a separate application, which is actually being considered at the moment, but isn't before us. We're just looking at the building. They would need to resolve the hard standing separately under that separate application. That's held up for a technical drainage issue, but which is not insurmountable, by the way. So it's just a matter that it isn't ready to be here before us for members. So I hope that explains some of the background to it anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. The first one I will take for comments will be Councillor Maureen Powell, please. Maureen.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very sorry, but I cannot support this. I was farming from 1953 to 1981 with a great many sheep, and in those days we didn't even take them into the barns unless we had a ewe or lamb that was very, very sickly. So sheep are basically hardy animals. In this day and age, and although I'm not farming now, my daughter is, I suppose I should have said an interest because I used to farm that long ago, but there we are, I'll declare it now. There is no need for them to be in for that length of time. And although he's going to have 350 eventually, they're not all going to be lambing at the same time. I mean, I'm sure that he's not going to put the tups in with them so that they all lamb in the same 3 weeks. Once they've lambed, as you say, after a couple of days and they're suckling the ewes, they're far better off outside. He stated, I think yesterday, that so he'd lost many lambs last time from the cold weather. You don't generally bring them back in after they've gone out with their mothers. They're made to be outside. The mothers are made to be outside because it's far better for the mothers to be grazing grass, even if you have to supplement it with other feedstuffs, than to be stuck in a shed. I do not think that a shed of that size is needed. Obviously, you have to put pens because when they're lambing, you need them to be on their own because I know there's missmothering. And the other thing is he said he didn't know which should have twins and which should have triplets. Most people with sheep these days have their ewes scanned and they know exactly how many lambs are going to be born to them. I haven't had much experience with this breed, I will admit, because most of ours were either Cluns, Shropshire, Oxford, and my daughter has Texels now, and she's up on a hill area where it's quite cold. I think that it's unnecessary, and the more you keep them in, the more they're liable to pick up disease. They're far better outside once they're on the feed. Once they've had a couple of days of good feed from their mothers, they will survive. If they're not surviving, they're a very, very weak lamb. So I'm very sorry, but I cannot support this building because it's far too big. The building we were in yesterday, without the wooden part of it taken out, I would think would be adequate. So I'm very sorry, I can't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Thank you for that detailed experience of your farming life. Councillor Matt Feakin now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I give way to Councillor Phil Murphy? I think he was next. Oh,
sorry. Sorry indeed. Yes, Councillor Murphy then next, please. I'll take you after Phil. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I'm going to have to take the other view than that was expressed by Councillor Powell. I didn't go to the site yesterday. I had another meeting on, but I am familiar with it. And I'm also familiar with the activities that have been going on there in the past. And I'm aware that there are, certainly the last time I looked, there was equipment in there. But that isn't the issue before us, as Phil was saying. I am concerned that there are animal welfare issues with the model of farming used by the applicant, and bear in mind that it's his business plan which is being put into operation here, not anybody else's. There is a substantial number of barns around, particularly 2 on that area already, but I don't think a further one is going to damage the area at all. He clearly needs it for his business plan, and on the basis of that, I think I'm likely to agree and vote for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Matt Feakin now next, please.
Thank you, Chair, and very much in line with Councillor Phil Murphy's comments then, I would support this and support the officer's recommendation for approval. It is incredibly hard to start up a business, a farming business, and to keep that going, and profitability isn't always there, so it's nice to see some investment going locally into that infrastructure for us. As Phil mentioned just then, there are other existing buildings on site, and I don't think that this building itself would be out of place adjacent to those other buildings. Just to note, if it was in England, you can build up to 1,000 square metres under permitted development rights. So
we're not in England now, Councillor Feakins.
No,
planning rules are different.
No, I know that, but it's just to remind ourselves sometimes that in the wider context, that what's allowable here and disallowable there are quite different sometimes, and it's not too far away from each other. So anyway, if Councillor Phil Murphy was proposing to move, I would second his recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Feakin. Councillor Tony Easton next, please.
Oh. Paul Jordan, Chair.
Sorry, I've missed you again. Councillor Jordan next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Perhaps you or one of the officers could help me with this one. In the summary, and the second statement in the summary, officers indicated that the size of this building was relative to the holding and the enterprise. Well, the question I have is that there must be a number of farmers, sheep farmers in the locality with at least 350 ewes. Do they all require a shed as large as this?
No.
Thank you.
Councillor Easton next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just some clarification from Phil, possibly, to do with Natural Resources Wales. There's a comment from the neighbour, I don't know who the neighbour was, that it's within 10 metres of watercourse. I don't know what that watercourse is. I know that the Allway Brook is to the south, and that leads into the River Usk, which is to the east. NRW don't have any problems with, or they appear not to have any problems with defined phosphate conditions. Really, Natural Resources Wales, are they really clear about the removal of wastewater, not what's on that particular site? Because hard standing, it's got to go somewhere.
Yeah, remember we're just looking at the building, Councillor Easton, not the hard standing today. So yeah, they've looked at it in great detail. There's actually been a habitats regulation assessment, habitats regulation assessment done by our own ecologists on it in terms of phosphate issue, and that's been sent to NRW who've agreed it. So that issue of contamination shouldn't arise in terms of increased phosphate pollution from this building. They're actually reusing the roof water for drinking purposes for the animals, so for the livestock. So again, in terms of surface water, that won't arise in terms of increasing water to the brook.
What's the floor in the shed? What is the floor contained in the shed? What is the floor?
It'll be a hard floor, won't it? So to help it keep
Exactly.
it clean. So, yeah.
So you get leakage from that then?
Yeah, they're managing that. There's a management plan that they put into effect, which NRW are happy with.
Right,
So
thank you.
yeah, they've been through it in great detail.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Roger Harris next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm in complete agreement with the words that Councillor Murphy uttered, and also Matt Feaking. What I am more concerned about is the fact that some of us are conjecturing whether or not this man has got a viable business plan here, which has got absolutely nothing to do with what we're here to consider. We're here to consider what is in front of us as a planning matter, and talking about how people farm sheep in other parts of the world has got absolutely no relevance to what we're looking at today. And I'm concerned that we keep wandering off along lines that we shouldn't be. As far as I can see, we've got a perfectly decent officers' report here. They're not flagging up any problems here. And as far as I'm concerned, I can't see any. If anything arises in the future that some of us might, in the back of our minds, consider to be a problem, then we deal with those if and when they come up. So as far as I'm concerned, I will be supporting this application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Sheila Woodhouse.
You've done it again, Chair?
Chair, I think it's Councillor Brown.
Oh, it must be something to do with my chat bar. Councillor Brown, please, then. Thank you, Councillor Woodhouse. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. I think going on the site visit, we saw that the barn itself had got the sheep in it, and then there was also a wooden building within it which was used for a residence, and then the other barn was for storing agricultural equipment, I believe, but we only actually saw we only had access to 2 out of the 4 storage areas because the other 2 were locked. Having listened to Councillor Powell, I do have some scepticism about this application, and I think the planning. I think Councillor Harris mentioned about the planning grounds, but I think under policy RE4, the planning ground is that it's reasonably required for agricultural purposes, and I did notice that there was a discrepancy between the correspondence that we had with regard to the number of ewes that lamb on a single day. For example, I think it said 15 to 20 ewes lamb on a similar day. And then I think in the report itself, and officers can correct me if I'm wrong, it says it's not unusual for 25 to 30 ewes to lamb in a single day, which is almost twice as many. And obviously, if the calculation is based on how many lambs, those who use to lamb in a single day, then there seems to be a discrepancy possibly in the calculations on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. And it hasn't been mentioned as yet, but when it comes to lambing, I've had experience in the past, but not of late. A lot of modern large flocks are what they call, they have the ewes sponged so that they can control exactly how many and a day or night are probably going to lamb. And that's what they do to eke out the sort of control of what they need to do their own husbandry with the sheep. But that's a matter of how they manage their lambing and the suitable requirements that they need. Anyway, I go next to Councillor Sheila Woodhouse, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, I found the site visit particularly useful yesterday, and I would like to agree with the comments made by Councillor Murphy and Councillor Feakins and others in support, because I do support this. and I think hopefully the applicant will grow his business if he's allowed to have this extra accommodation, this extra barn. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Woodhouse. Councillor Anne Webb next. I think I've got it in the right order.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you. I'm sorry I wasn't able to join you yesterday, but we were away for the day. Just a couple of comments. I consider that the comments made by the local member and of Councillor Powell are very relevant. It's not a farming practice to keep 300 sheep inside in this country. It's a health hazard in my concern. We kept Dorset horns here. They just lambed themselves outside and never were kept inside, perhaps just while they lambed if we had to help them, but very rarely. They're a very hardy breed, and did we ever have to help them? We belong to the Dorset Sheep Society. We had a pedigree herd here. So I do know a little bit about it, and I would consider that the sheep would be most unhappy inside. They'd much prefer to be out grazing and looking after their little lambs themselves. And as Ruth has quite rightly said, and Maureen Powell, actually Councillor Powell, we do know now how many lambs sheep are going to have before they have them, and so we can make accommodation and preparation for that. But a sheep shed with 300 sheep in it. Anyway, thank you very much indeed. I won't be voting for this application, I might say, as you might have guessed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. And also, this is an extremely large shed. As I said, you generally lamb, they're Dorset sheep, they're very hardy sort of sheep, and this is an enormous shed, and the late correspondence was weighed very heavily on the welfare of the animals. And I'm sorry, but if the applicant was so worried about the welfare of his sheep, which would be paramount, as you would with anybody, as we referred to people and their children, he would have taken the machinery out of that other large shed, put it on the hard standing, and he would have moved a lot of his flock if they were under distress and overcrowding with bad weather. So I'm sorry, it is far too big a shed, and it is not justified there. There was no bedding, there was no hay or concentrates in evidence at that place yesterday, and the acreage, would that ever withstand all that? Yes, he can talk about 350 ewes, but then when you've got the lambs on top of that, where is he going to grow the hay? There's quite a lot of issues here, and I'm sorry, I certainly could not support this application. And I go now to the next county councillor who wishes to comment, and that's Councillor Alan Davis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I probably know as much about sheep as you do about blast furnaces, but so.
I welcome your comment, even so, Councillor Davis.
No, I've listened with interest, and I do understand what seems to be some suspicion about this application, if I can put it that way, from people who are very experienced in terms of farming. But I also have to agree with Councillor Roger Harris, because at the end of the day, we've got to judge on whether this complies with planning legislation or it doesn't. And as far as I can see, I can't think of any reason why we can genuinely say, well, we're going to refuse this, even though there are some question marks about the motivation for it, I think. And at the end of the day, if some of those suspicions should come to fruition, then we have an enforcement system which would be used to address those issues. So I'm afraid at this stage I'm going to support the application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor David Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was on site visit yesterday, and I was concerned when I got on site because of what had been said 2 weeks earlier about the application. But while on site and looking around, I thought there was plenty and ample space for this extra building. And I also, everything the different members threw at him, the applicant, he answered truly. And he never held back. Yes, Councillor Brown is right, we couldn't get into 2 of the units, and he did explain the reason why we couldn't get into 1, and that's quite acceptable. I accepted that. But I feel that what's been said today, I have to support this application on the grounds of what I seen yesterday and what I heard yesterday. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. My main concern is the justification for such a large shed, for the justification of such a large shed when his main concern is for the welfare of his sheep. Yes, you've got plenty of room for it, but is it justified? But as I will say, that's my comment, and all members have had every chance now to put their comments forward, and I believe it has been moved now, Councillor Murphy, to be approved, and it is seconded by, I think, Councillor Feakin. I will now take a vote on the acceptance of the planning application.
Madam Chair, just wondered if the local member was allowed to comment first.
Before I go to the vote, then thank you for reminding me, Councillor Brown. It's a bit out of sequence when we're doing things online. I hope you can hold that on the screen for the moment, please, Nicola, and ask Councillor Smith. I'm not sure if she's able, by the sounds of the consequences at home, that she wished to.
I'm still here, Chairman.
Still there. Would you like to comment again?
No, it's all quiet on the domestic front at the moment, so we're all right.
Right, thank you, Councillor.
I've listened with interest to the debate. I thank members for attending. I have a concern, as you have, Chairman. It's a huge building. The whole development there is inappropriate. We have the two large sheds. I just wonder what will become of the large shed if the sheep venture is not a successful one. Yeah, we need to look after Monmouth, and we need to respect our scenery, and this is not enhancing it. But thank you for your consideration, members.
Thank you. Yes, I think they could have utilised the one shed to increase. I'm not against anybody increasing and hoping to work to the future, but they could have utilised the two sheds for the sheep before they ever embarked on such a big shed. Anyway, it has now been proposed and seconded, and I will now take the vote, please. The vote has been taken. Denzel, could you introduce yourself and please give the result?
Yes, good afternoon, Chair. My name is Denzel. I'm the solicitor sitting on the planning committee. We've had 13 responses, which I believe is all the members present today. 8 have been for approval and 5 are against approval, and therefore that motion has been passed.
Thank you very much indeed, Denzel. So that's been approved. We now go on to the next application, and that is in Roggett, and this is application DM 2021-00724. I believe, Andrew, you're presenting this. Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And by way of introduction, my name is Andrew Jones. I'm the Development Management Area Manager. So I can't see the presentation on the screen at the moment. Sorry, Chair, unless that's just myself. Oh, there we go. Excellent.
Thank you, Andrew. I can see it now.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, yep, good afternoon, members. So this is a full application that is seeking full planning permission for the development of attached 2-storey, 2-bedroom dwelling that's located along Ifton Road in Roggett. And just for reference, this was previously presented at the September meeting of Planning Committee. However, just for clarity, I'll just run through the application proposal and the presentation. So as you can see on the slides on the screen, that's identifying the site there, not far from the main junction, and that's it. So it sits currently, the plot is currently the garden area of property known as T Newydd, and that block plan there just shows the extent of what would be the curtilage for the proposed dwelling, as well as what is left then for the existing. And then on to the next slide. These were the original plans that were submitted with the application. However, there have been amendments to these, as we will see on the next slide. That's helpfully circled there to address issues with regards to the window at the rear. So that is the new build 2-storey dwelling before us. There's also some photographs if we can just run through for some context. So that again shows the existing dwelling T Newydd. That's a conservatory that will be demolished to facilitate the siting of the dwelling. And you can see there the neighbouring dwelling as well. That's just showing the plot in its entirety, I suppose, there with, say, that's the conservatory to go. And that's the view from the highway. And these are taken from some of the neighbouring properties. Right. So as stated, this was previously presented at the meeting of the 7th of September and was put forward with a recommendation from officers to approve the proposed development. However, members expressed concerns over the proposals, and it was resolved that the application be refused on the grounds that the proposed dwelling would result in an overdevelopment of the plot and that it would be detrimental to the amenity of neighbouring properties. Now, there are two detailed reasons for refusals that are set out in the officer's report. However, I would note also that if members are still minded to refuse the application, that a third reason would need to be added in respect of affordable housing and the lack of legal agreement to secure the financial contribution. I would therefore suggest the following wording as a third reason, and I'll just read that to you now, and that is that the applicant has failed to enter into a Section 106 agreement that is necessary to secure the affordable housing requirement, and therefore the proposal is contrary to policy S4 of the Monmouthshire County Council Local Development Plan 2011-2021. So therefore the application is represented to you today, members, for endorsement of what are now 3 reasons for refusal. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much indeed for that update on that application, Andrew. Does anybody wish to comment further on this, as we did discuss it at length at the last committee meeting? Anybody wish to comment?
I've got my hand up in the chat.
Sorry, I can see Councillor Murphy first, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say that I think the additional reason for refusal is absolutely right. I support that, and I'm happy to confirm refusal subject to that.
Right, thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Tony Eason.
Yeah, just yes, I support the position we're in with the refusal, but could I have more explanation as to where we got to regarding the Section 106 agreement or not being there at the beginning? Why wasn't it there at the beginning? And no, it's a reason, no, part of the reason for refusal. Could Andrew explain the sequence of events there?
Right, thank you. Andrew, would you wish to answer Councillor Eason?
Yeah, well, the application, when it previously came to committee, Councillor Eason, was put forward with a recommendation for approval. And normally at that point in time, the Section 106 wouldn't have been prepared. It would be subject to members' endorsement. And then the 106 would have been drafted further to that. Now, in this instance, obviously, members have had their discussion at the previous meeting. And since that time, then, one alternative that could have been provided would be for the applicant to have drafted perhaps a unilateral undertaking that could be presented to us. But in the absence of anything to secure that, it is standard practice that in the absence of such a legal control that we're now looking at, that would become in itself a reason for refusal, because it is not in compliance with policy S4. So that's why it wasn't there ready previously. We now say the committee minded to refuse, and we are in a position now that it is now becoming itself a reason. I hope Councillor Eason, that briefly explains for you.
Sort of. I thought that the Section 106 agreement had to be agreed before it went before committee in any case, in general terms.
In terms of the contribution and the sum that would have been required, that would have been agreed. That is calculated now through the application process because of the revised SPG in respect of affordable housing. But in terms of it being signed or drafted or anything of that nature, that would normally commence
through the legal department.
Post resolution to approve, and in this instance we've not had that. It wasn't resolved to approve at the last meeting, and we are where we are now, and the absence of anything to secure that, like I said, is in itself a reason to refuse, and that is sort of standard practice.
Lovely, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Anybody else wish to comment? If not, I will take it as Councillor Murphy has moved for us to be minded to refuse the application. I believe it was seconded by you, Councillor Eason.
Yes, I'll second it, Chair.
Right, could I please go to the vote then? Thank you.
We've now had 12 responses, Chair. 11 are for refusal and 1 is against refusal. So I think we can say that has been refused.
Right, thank you very much, Denzel. We now go back to the agenda, and the next application is 2021-01-010, and that is Pathways Vinegar Hill. I believe, Amy, if you introduce yourself, please. It's your application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As the presentation will be up shortly, I'm sure. Here we go. There we go. So yes, the application before you today is DM 2021-01000 for the discharge of conditions 4, 5, 9, 11, 12, 14 and 15, which is at Pathways, Vinegar Hill, ND. So these conditions are attached to Planning Permission DM 2020-00234 and involve details concerning highways, ecology and green infrastructure on the site. The Planning Permission DM 2020-00234 granted approval for 2 new 4-bedroom dwellings on the site. The application before members today is for the approval of the subsequent details in relation to those new buildings. For clarity, the assessment of the suitability of the new dwellings has already been considered and granted approval by this committee and is not part of the application today. For completeness, the sides show the application outlined in red, identifying the host building pathways towards the northwestern part of the site. Here we go on that slide. So the next slide shows an aerial view of the plot again with the host building in the top corner of the site. And you can see the access there off Vinegar Hill. Moving on to the next slide, it shows the position of the 2 new dwellings and the associated access and parking provision for them. If we move on through the slides, these show the existing site, first looking west to Walnut House from the entrance of the site. The second looking up into the northern part of the site towards the existing building pathways. The third photograph shows a central portion of the site looking south with Pathways property behind. And the last shows the entrance to the site from Vinegar Hill. So as stated, this application is just for the discharge of conditions attached to the planning approval for the 2 dwellings. So for clarity, I'll take each of these conditions in turn. So condition 4 requires details of the proposed improvements to the access into the site. These details can be seen on the next slide. So they include hard surfacing to the access to provide a 15-metre length of permeable paving at the point of access from Vinegar Hill. And that access will then be 4.1 metres wide for a distance of 10 metres at this junction to allow 2 cars to pass, and that no surface water shall discharge onto the existing carriageway. Following review of these issues and clarification of the drainage, the Highways Officer offers no objection to the proposals and being satisfied that this meets the requirements of the condition. An objection was raised in terms of suitability of the site for emergency vehicles. However, this has been assessed by the fire officer, who confirms that the emergency vehicles can access the properties in the event of an emergency should they need to do so. Condition 5 requires a construction traffic management plan to be submitted and approved. This identifies the hours of construction work, that residents will be informed prior to the commencement of works, confirmation that an area of unloading and loading will be provided inside the site, and identifies an appropriate route to and from site for construction and delivery vehicles. A number of objections have been received in relation to the potential disturbance, damage and danger from construction vehicles and general movements into and out of the site. The area of turning and unloading is either side of the first turning head in the access road adjacent to plot 2, is shown on a later slide. It is acknowledged that the element of disturbance is inevitable during construction projects of this type. However, the construction traffic management plan aims to reduce this to a minimum necessary by the main key objectives above. Therefore, the construction traffic management plan, following consideration of this plan, the highway officers offers no objection to the management plan and satisfies the requirement of this condition. So moving to the next slide, this concerns conditions 9, 11 and 12. So condition 9 relates to the need to identify ecological enhancements to the site. Full details of bat and bird boxes attached to the proposed new dwellings have been submitted and are considered acceptable to the authority's biodiversity officer. This is considered to be sufficient to satisfy the requirements of this condition. Condition 11 relates to the need to submit a green infrastructure management plan. This has been submitted and after extensive discussion and amendments provides suitable mitigation. The mitigation now proposes change from the original proposals of a wider area of wildflower meadow, originally proposed to the area of grassland to the southeast corner of the site. However, alternative proposals for mitigation have been put forward, consisting of the provision of smaller pollinator areas spread across the site and the inclusion of a number of additional trees planted across the southern and western boundaries. The ecological mitigation for a proposal can be acceptable in different forms. It is not the case that only one solution is appropriate. The mitigation has been assessed by the Council's Landscape and Urban Design Officer as well as the Biodiversity Officer, who, following amendments to the scheme, offer no objection to the proposals. The information submitted is now considered appropriate to satisfy the requirements of this condition. Condition 12 requires details of hard and soft landscaping. As can be seen on the slide, the main access of the drive is to be tarmac, with permeable paving to the parking areas in front of the properties, together with an identification of the wildflower grassland, planting and additional trees required as per condition 11. A separate application has been made for SEDS, or sustainable drainage, and this is being considered separately by the SEDS team. This application to discharge conditions is separate and standalone application to the SEDS application. If any amendments are required in relation to SEDS, then these would be subject to subsequent approval as per this condition. As per the plans that are submitted, the Council's Landscape Officer has not raised an objection to the proposals and is considered that the details are appropriate to satisfy the requirements of this condition. Condition 14 requires the details of earthworks to be submitted. The following slide shows these details, as we can see here. The applicant has provided drawings showing the details of a temporary earthwork bund to the south of proposed dwellings and a temporary turning area for loading and unloading of vehicles to the east of plot 2 in line with the construction management plan. The area of unloading and loading is marked in red and the hatched area, and the area of bund is marked in blue. These details are considered appropriate and acceptable during the construction process. The finishing and landscaping will be carried out in accordance with the GI management plan. The temporary bund is just that, temporary. The landscaping will be completed in accordance with the management plan. And this is considered appropriate to meet the requirements of this condition. Finally, condition 15 requires a schedule of landscape maintenance. This has been reviewed by the Council's Landscape Officer, who is satisfied that they are sufficient to maintain the landscaping proposed to an appropriate standard. The details are considered appropriate to meet the requirements of this condition. The application has received a number of objections with particular focus on highways and ecology issue. In relation to the highways comments, the concerns over safety, disruption and potential damage during neighbouring properties has been taken into account. The defined access routes, turning and unloading locations as well as controlling times is considered acceptable to mitigate against these issues. In relation to the GI and ecological enhancements, it's considered that a number of different forms of mitigations could be put forward, all equally acceptable. But as proposed, the scattered wildflowered meadows in each plot, together with the tree planting and the hedgerow maintenance, again addresses these concerns and is sufficient. Overall, following extensive negotiations of the details, they are considered acceptable and now recommended to the Planning Committee for approval of all conditions, namely 4, 5, 9, 11, 12, 14 and 15. And I refer back to members for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. That's quite a lot of detail to put to committee on conditions. The local member, County Councillor Lisa Dimmick, although not a member of the Planning Committee, wishes to speak on this application. So I welcome you aboard the committee, Planning Committee this afternoon, Lisa. So please comment.
Thank you, Chair. As local member and someone who lived on Vinegar Hill, I still have concerns regarding this grey area. That is the construction traffic management plan, and the report acknowledges the site is unsuitable for heavy vehicles. And in section 7 of the CTMP and in the officer's report, it states unloading area to be provided on site to enable all delivery and construction vehicles to turn and leave travel in a forward direction. This may be possible for smaller vehicles, but it is definitely not possible for larger articulated vehicles like 8-wheeler tippers. Section 10 of the construction traffic management plan suggests it's to use farm equipment, tractor and trailer to transport. Please can it be confirmed today what method will be utilised by the applicant to avoid disruption and any risk to Vinegar Hill residents, especially the occupiers of Fairbank and Gwynroyston. When I also spoke to Nick Alfieri regarding the emergency access, I was told a fire emergency vehicle could not access the site. So I want to know what's changed there. And has the highways officer now visited the site and walked Vinegar Hill and the access to the proposed site? Thank you, Amy, for covering off the GI management plan. There's an awful lot of information you provided there. I have to apologise for my lack of technical knowledge on this one. So I'm after some clarity and reassurance for officers on best practice. The latest GI management plan has relocated the orchard from the southeast of the site to the various areas around the site, and also submitted a SUDS plan with the original plan and application 234 showing the area to the north site will contain swales and below the turning area is a foul sewage pump. There is no single plan showing both the SUDS and the GI assets, and the GI ecological department only use the GI plan and the SUDS department only use the SUDS plan. The GI ecology department have no objection to the discharge of these conditions. It appears they are unaware of the swales and the foul sewage pump. Am I correct believing that there's going to be swales containing trees as well as trees around the area holding the sewage pump? I have to say I support the Community Council in their refusal on this application due to the grey areas and inconsistent comments, and would like to see these grey areas addressed before approving. And just for note-taking purposes, and I want it minuted, our waste department visited site and met with the owner of Gwynroyston and agreed to a location for the waste of the proposed properties, and I would like to see this upheld. So thank you, Chair, for allowing me to return and speak on this application.
All right, thank you very much indeed for your point of view on that application, Councillor Dimmick. I will now ask Amy if she wants to comment on that. You know, obviously you've got some concerns still, although this is on conditions because the applications themselves have already been approved. Thank you. Amy, could you comment further, please?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I was just making a couple of notes there while you were asking those questions, so hopefully we've covered them all. But my colleague Mark Davis will come in and have a little conversation about the construction traffic management plan issue. So if I just cover off the second part of your question there in terms of GI. So yes, you are correct that the original plan showed more green infrastructure mitigation in that southern portion of the site, but after quite a lot of negotiations and discussions with GI officer and the biodiversity officer, we looked at different ways of providing that mitigation. I think, as is mentioned in the report and in the presentation, it's not a one size fits all. That what was put forward was one solution. What is now put forward is a different solution, but equally as appropriate. I take your point that it doesn't marry up with the SUDS application, but again, as we've said, these are two separate applications. So the SUDS application is considered independently from the planning application, and this application to discharge the conditions. If it transpires that there are differences between these two plans, then amendments will need to be sought to clarify that. But at present, what's put in front of us and what we are asked to consider is considered acceptable by the officer's professional expertise, and therefore it meets the requirement of the condition. Mark, did you want to come in and provide comments on the construction management plan?
Seems we might be having trouble connecting with Mark Davis, the officer.
My apologies, Chair. I was still on mute.
Sorry,
apologies to all. Apologies to all.
Welcome. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. There goes my grandiose introduction. My apologies. I'm the Highway Development Manager for Monmouthshire County Council. I listened to Councillor Dimmock's sort of presentation, and to be fair, I only picked up on one sort of formal question there, and that was whether a highway officer had recently visited site. I've only just returned from leave today, so I haven't had the opportunity, and I can confirm that none of my colleagues have visited site to look at Vinegar Hill or the actual site in question, but I can assure Councillor Dimmock I'm fully conversant with Vinegar Hill, knowing the site very well, and this particular site at Pathways, and I'm fairly comfortable with the comments that we provided in support of or discharging condition 5 in particular, that being a construction traffic management plan. I understand the community's concerns regarding the use of Vinegar Hill, but as the planning officer and the chairs mentioned, this is an application that's already been approved, and we're just looking to discharge conditions. CTMPs are generally asked for most developments in Monmouthshire now, where we're looking for the developer to minimise disruption and congestion to existing residents and ensure that the development is delivered in a safe and mindful manner of health and safety aspects. I believe the applicant has done that. And yes, all deliveries to the site will have to be managed. There are no traffic regulations or conditions on Vinegar Hill restricting its use by any motor vehicle, and is open to all users of the highway, public or commercial. What I would say is our refuse vehicles drive up and down there on a daily basis, or maybe not daily, at least twice a week, collecting all manner of waste material. So construction vehicles, if they're the same ilk, should be able to access and egress the development reasonably well. And again, it is down to the delivery driver to ensure that the vehicle that they're using is appropriate for the road that they're travelling on. Any damage that has occurred to neighbouring properties is a civil matter between the delivery driver and the owners of those properties. It is not a highway related issue because we've got no measures to control the use of the highway. Again, that could well be considered a police matter as well. So in terms of what the applicant has submitted, I think they've looked at it pragmatically. They're providing reasonable turning facilities within the site, dedicating areas for contractors' vehicles. I believe that the access is more than capable of accommodating the construction vehicles required to build out the development, and they will get less as the building progresses. The largest vehicles, I'm assuming, and from CTMP, most of the earthworks will be retained on site, so we've minimal sort of removal of surplus material off site, which usually involves tipper lorries, but then again they can be smaller. A lot of contractors now use tractor and trailer type vehicles to remove surplus material. They are far more maneuverable than rigid vehicles. The largest vehicles we're likely to experience is a concrete wagon, and again, any property on Vinegar Hill can have delivery of concrete at any time. So it's not an unusual vehicle to be driving up and down Vinegar Hill. So in that regard, I think the Highway Authority have considered it appropriately and have offered no objections to discharging in particular condition 5. If there's any other questions from members, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for that explanation, Mark. I don't know if it's always appropriate because it's not a planning application, it's a discharge of conditions. But after I've taken comments from members of the committee, Councillor Dimmock, if you wish, you can sum up for 2 minutes at the end if you so wish. So if you stay on board, you'll hear the comments then from the committee. I think Councillor Murphy is the first one who wishes to comment. So Councillor Murphy first, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And oh, this is a difficult one, isn't it? I've got a great deal of sympathy with the residents on Vinegar Hill. But the fact of the matter is that these properties have got permission, and we always get residence issues up there. That's inevitable because of the tightness of the site. But the applicant, from what I can see, has complied. He's adjusted his submissions. We will have to ensure that the construction traffic management plan is adhered to, and I'm quite certain that that the residents up there will make us well aware if there's any deviance from that. So I think on balance, I am minded to vote for approval, but I do recognise the significant issues up there. As I say, it is a very, very tight site, and it'll be good when everybody's finished building up there. I think perhaps it'll settle down a bit. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Roger Harris next, please, to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, it obviously is a very tight site, but it is a site that has got permission for these two dwellings, and you know, we're not going to go back on that in any way. That is a done deal. We have officers that are experts in particular fields that we consult when particular aspects of planning come up, and we have consulted them on these changes of conditions here, and they have all come back unanimously and said there aren't any problems that are insurmountable, and there should be no difficulty in changing the wording on some of these conditions, and therefore I have no reason to, as a member, to question them. We employ them, we pay them, we use their expertise, and who am I to say they don't know what they're talking about? So I'm happy to, if it hasn't been proposed, that we change the conditions as per the right up there, then I'm happy to propose it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Tony Eason next, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm familiar with Vinegar Hill as well. I am concerned about conditions 4 and 5 to do with highway safety construction management plan. No doubt the officers' experience has been brought in to look at this, but it's not so much the position of the officers. What they say now is how the construction management plans are conducted in the future. We've had problems in Caldecott where the construction management plan was quite precise, and it's caused constant problem after problem after problem because the construction traffic management plans are not being adhered to by the developers. And I noticed that Mr. Davis made the comment that if there's any damage caused to other people's property, it's a civil matter. I think we as councillors have got to be cognizant of the fact that we don't want to see other people's property damaged because the construction traffic management plan isn't being adhered to. I'd like to see firmer conditions firmer outlines of conditions 4 and 5 before I can accept this one. The rest of them I'm happy with, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Councillor Louise Brown, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think the question with regard to fire vehicles and access, I think the local member raised, but I don't think there's been any answer to that. And with regard to the construction management plan, I don't know the full wording of the plan, but in the response, the highways officer said that appropriate vehicles would be used. Can that be included within the wording of the construction management plan to ensure that is actually done in practice? You know, because obviously mention has been made of different size vehicles, tipper trucks. So basically, I've got a question with regard to the fire access, and you know, whether the wording of the construction management plan is sufficient to ensure appropriate vehicles for the site itself. And really the other question I've got is with regard to foul sewage. I appreciate that it's been said that the GI plan is separate from SUDS, but normally when we get planning permission, I presume that the foul sewage is a separate sewage system from the main sewage, and I'm not really sure whether or not that's actually the case. But I think, again, I would like some clarification, because I would have thought that the location of the foul sewage would actually be quite important, and any landscaping around it, you know, obviously with regard to its location for nearby properties as well, you know, to ensure that there aren't any unnecessary smells and so forth as a result if it isn't going to be main drainage. So I do think that those GI and SUDS conditions and the CMT possibly do need a little bit more clarification on effectively just improving it according to what the highways officer has said, and also what the planning committee members know with regard to the practical siting of things like foul sewage, you know, to ensure that they're located in the best location. I mean, you can actually have a plan that says where it's going to be located, and hopefully you know, nicely landscaped as well, because obviously that I do think that is part of the green infrastructure considerations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Amy, you wish to comment next? Thank you, Amy.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Thank you. Yes, there's a couple of points that were raised there. I just think it's important to clarify. So firstly, yes, you're right. I in my response to Councillor Dimmock missed off your question about the fire vehicles. So our building regs team did raise concerns, and that was checked with the fire officer at the South Wales Fire Service, who confirmed that you can access the property with emergency vehicles. And in addition, the properties will be fully kitted out with modern day fire suppression sprinkler systems. So that's considered acceptable in that respect, and that all the fire issues is dealt with through building regs, and it is through a separate application and given full consideration in that arena. There's mentions over the highway safety and the construction traffic management plan. I don't think that the condition requires rewording, and as been discussed by my colleague there, that the details within that construction management plan are considered to be sufficient. I think, yes, in the past we have had instances where developers have not complied with their construction management plan. However, we've been quite proactive in taking action that's necessary to ensure compliance and deal with those issues should they come up. We can't necessarily judge every book in the same way, and as I put forward, the details in relation to this construction management plan are considered sufficient in this circumstance. In addition, paragraph 10 of the construction management plan does specify that only light vehicles shall be accessing the site for delivery, and all traffic and plant will be instructed to approach the site from the north via Dancing Hill. So as we've said, we do consider the details within that construction management plan to be sufficient. And the last point was in relation to foul sewerage. If I can just politely remind members that the details as per those conditions identified in the report is only what is in front of us today. There are no conditions that require details of foul sewerage to be submitted, and therefore it is not part of your consideration today. Thank you, members. Hope that clarifies everything.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'll allow Councillor Brown to come back very swiftly, and also Councillor Eason swiftly. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, I'm not really clear why foul sewage isn't considered, because often it is a condition with regard to planning matters and landscaping matters and so forth. So I'm a little bit confused as to why it shouldn't apply in this particular case. The other question I've got that I forgot to mention previously, and you know, perhaps Amy Longford could come back on that, is that with regard to the temporary bund that's going to be generated, I can remember on one site that a temporary bund was effectively left, and you know, obviously that has landscaping issues, because sometimes the debris from building is then turfed over and not necessarily removed off site. How will you ensure that the temporary bund will be removed in this particular circumstance? Thank you. So again, it's a question about the foul sewerage and the landscaping, and then with regard to the temporary bund. But I'm glad that the construction management thing does include about light vehicles, and also the fire safety aspect, because I think that has been answered, you know, appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Amy, do you wish to come back and comment any of the observations of Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, the bund is a very good question. So the bund is a temporary situation. It's where the developer will be digging the foundations, and the earthworks, the earth that has come out of that site, will be piled towards the back of plot 1 and 2 in a temporary position. Obviously, once you start to excavate soil, it takes up far more volume than it does when it's compacted in the ground. As I say, this is only a temporary situation, and the GI management plan and the levels on the additional plans in terms of the excavation plans will have to be adhered to later on. So we have a ways of being able to ensure compliance with that GI management plan, and that bund will be removed and the levels returned to an appropriate standard and what's approved on the plans.
What about the
drainage? Yes, the drainage.
Sorry, the foul sewage. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah.
Oh yes, sorry, the foul sewage. Yes, well that's it's identified as public sewage and a packaged treatment plant on the application form, and there is no foul water condition on the decision notice. This will be a matter for building regs, and it is not part of the quite lengthy condition, which is number 11, which is the GI management plan. So it is dealt with and it is addressed, but that's under separate legislation.
Thank you very much. I now go to Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I support conditions 9, 11, 12, 14 and 15, but I'm still not comfortable with conditions 4 and 5. Is it possible for me to move an amendment that we accept the conditions of the other items and the officer's recommendation to accept, but on conditions 4 and 5, we ask to go back to the highways officers and with the local member to come to a satisfactory conclusion to that.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. I don't know if Amy wishes to comment then, or whether Councillor Dimmock.
I would support that motion.
Sorry?
I would support that motion.
Right, thank you, local member. Craig, do you wish to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, in terms of procedure, I think Councillor Murphy made a motion to approve, and it was seconded by Roger Harris. I'm not sure if legal colleagues want to comment on that, but I think that might be worth taking a vote based on what's being indicated, outlined in the officer's report, and then if that is not supported, then maybe take a vote on whether we can approve the conditions apart from 4 and 5, as suggested by Councillor Easton. I think that's probably the right procedure to go through, but I would take legal advice on that.
Do you think, Chair, that we took forward a motion to accept before a lot of members have spoken? I feel that maybe it should be rescinded and look at where we are now, because Councillor Murphy and Councillor Harris made a recommendation before we even had a chance to make our own recommendations.
Is it? Sorry, Madam Chair. Can I?
Yes, carry on.
Is it worth then just clarifying with Councillor Murphy and Councillor Roger Harris that they still feel the same way?
I'm quite happy to answer that. I'm personally happy with the explanations given by Mark Davis, and the fact that if you drill down into the construction traffic management plan, it does specify light vehicles. It does specify that they come up from Dancing Hill. I'm not quite sure what we achieve by deferring any decision on conditions 4 and 5. So I'll stay with it.
You're still standing with what you suggested?
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Harris, are you wishing to comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As far as I remember, for the length that I've been on the planning committee, if a member at any time proposes that we accept or reject, and another member backs that up as a seconder, then that's what we go to vote on. We don't have people coming in later on and saying, you know, we should not have accepted that decision. If we vote, if somebody proposes and seconds, and the committee decides that they don't like it, then we obviously go on to another discussion and another vote. But it's been proposed and seconded, and I'm certainly not backtracking in any way on my decision. I agree with Councillor Murphy on the conditions that Councillor Easton is worried about. I haven't got any concerns there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair, I feel I must object to that situation, because I do believe that having made the proposal right at the beginning of the discussion and having a second right at the beginning of the discussion, it's stopped comments by Councillor Brown and other councillors making comments which could change the situation, which, as Councillor Harris says, yes, they made a proposal, made a decision. I got no problem with that, but I believe the process is wrong in this case, because we haven't been allowed to put forward our specific views. And if Councillor Murphy can remember the local situation in Caldecott and Cowent, where we agreed to a traffic management plan which went haywire, caused problems for all sorts of people, I believe sometimes we should wait towards the end of the discussions before we make the votes for and against. And I'd like the monitor officer to look at this, please.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Councillor Dimmock, do you wish to sum up now? I think all members have every chance of the committee now to comment.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, I hope our concerns do not materialise, and I agree our officers are incredibly talented, knowledgeable and very experienced. But one thing for Councillor Harris to remember is local knowledge is just as important when debating issues like this. I agree with Councillor Easton, you know, on the civil, you know, I appreciate Mark's comments on it being a civil matter. However, we shouldn't allow it to get to a point of claims. I have shared with officers several photographs over the past 18 months of walls and property being damaged by delivery vehicles. I don't feel that the delivery methods have been clearly defined here today. I still think it's a very grey area. So yeah, but thank you for allowing me to speak, and thank you, Councillor Brown and Councillor Easton, for your support today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dimmock. I don't think there's need for any other comment. If officers are happy now, as well as the members, I will now go to the vote for the discharge of the conditions. Right, thank you, Denzel. Do you wish to comment on any of that has been said?
No, only to say that so we've had the motion in line with the officer's recommendation, which we forwarded and then seconded, and then Councillor Easton has proposed an amendment to that. However, that hasn't been seconded by anyone, so that's obviously the only motion in front of the committee at the moment.
We didn't ask for a second.
And I think in terms of Anthony Easton's comments in relation to the original motion, if members are minded to agree with him, then they're perfectly capable to vote against approval, as I imagine he will be in this scenario.
Right. I'm sure all members agree with or understand what Denzel has just explained. Anybody who hasn't, please say so in the chat bar. Right, so we are going now for approval for the discharge of conditions or against the approval. If you could please place your vote now.
So we've now had 12 responses. I believe there's one member yet to vote. However, 10 of them have been for approval, 2 are against approval, and therefore that motion's quite clearly been approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Denzel. We go now to the next application on the agenda, and this is presented for the Tree Preservation Order, TPO, and this is, I believe, in Grossmont. Who's presenting this, please? Is it Jim Keach, or Amy's going to put it forward and Jim will be there to comment, I expect. Thank you, Amy.
That's correct, Madam Chair, yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Jim, please stay with us. We may well be asking you for your advice.
That's fine. Yeah.
So, thank you very much, Chair. So the report before you today is the confirmation of Tree Preservation Order MCC 289 2021, which relates to trees at Well Farm in Grossmont. The site can be seen on the slide as the hatched area to the west of Grossmont village. This is the white rectangle between the edge of the conservation area, pink line, and the development boundary, the black line. So it's currently an open field with a number of specimen trees following the western hedgerow. The area of the hatched land is allocated for housing in the current LDP site SAH 11. So following the felling of a large oak at Well Farm, Grossmont, the council's tree officer attended site to investigate the loss of the tree. It became apparent that the felled tree was unprotected, and so the owner had not acted outside the legal requirements. Felling of the tree was completely legal. However, whilst at the site, the officer assessed the value of the remaining trees and the adjacent trees in the immediate area. The council's tree officer considered that remaining trees on site, namely T1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, are worthy of protection, and has subsequently served a TPO on all trees. The slides there will show you that's T2, tree 2, 3, and then 4 and 5 are grouped together. So if we just go back to T1, just a second, please. The photo shows that T1 has been reduced to a stump. As we've said, this felling was completely legal. There is nothing untoward happening there. In some instances, the remaining tree will regrow. However, it hasn't happened in this case, and our tree officer has been out to confirm that that is the case. Therefore, it's now recommended that the order be amended to remove T1 and cover trees T1 to 5 only. So an objection has been received in relation to this TPO, stating that the oak, T1, as you can see in front of us, was cut down due to ill health and safety reasons, due to overhanging branches and the proximity to overhead power lines. And obviously this was within their control. The objector states that they have planted a large number of trees on their land over the past 30 years and have only felled dangerous trees. They state they have no intention of felling trees T1 to 5 and do not wish them to be included in the proposed TPO. They also request that as T1 has a rotten core and is not going back, this should also be removed from the order. So if we scroll to the other side, you can see on the aerial photograph then of all of the trees in context. They are T1 to the top corner of the site and T2 to 3 follow the hedgerow on the other side. So it is recommended to the committee that tree T1, the stump, is removed from the order, but trees T2, T3, T4 and T5 remain, and that the TPO is confirmed for trees 2 to 5. And I refer back to members for your consideration, and obviously Jim Keach is here with us and available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Maureen Powell, Councillor Powell, I think you've got your hand up first to comment, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very familiar with this area because the people who used to farm it and myself, we've been friends since we were children, so I know the fields very well indeed. And of course, I used to live out at Langure. I'm quite in favour of the TPOs been putting on the other trees, and obviously, if the one that they've chopped, more or less chopped down and left the stub, if it is rotten in the centre, obviously it's better to be removed. But I propose that we accept the TPOs on the other trees. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Powell. Anybody else wish to comment? No other members of the committee, but unless you wish to comment at all, Jim, now that you've been very patient with us this afternoon.
No, Madam Chair, I'm quite happy to accept the recommendations of Planning Committee. As I say, I've spoken to the landowner and advised him that I'm recommending that T1 be removed from the TPO because it was shocked to death, for want of a better phrase. But I'd like to ensure that the others are protected because it is possible, not probable, but it is possible that land may eventually come up for development, and it would be wise to have those trees protected before that actually happens.
Yeah, I can understand your concern because once they come down, that is it, isn't it, Jim?
That's right. Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And we like to maintain as many trees as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
In fact, encouraging us to plant more and more as
Absolutely.
It is.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, thank you very much for your input anyway, Jim. It's good to see you. Anybody else wish to comment? If not, I will take it to the vote, please.
Good afternoon, Chair. So we've now had 10 responses, 11, all are in favour of the recommendation. So I can say that that motion has been passed as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Denzel. Number 6 on the agenda is for the new appeals to be received. So that I don't think there's any need to comment further unless any officer wishes to comment. Phil, do you have any comment to make on those? Otherwise, I will close the meeting.
No, they're just for information. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Right, thank you very much, Phil. If members could still stay on board for a moment, we will finish live streaming and there's a couple of announcements we wish to make to a committee. So if Nicola can discharge us from the live stream, please.